When we think about how a nation begins, it's easy to picture these grand, heroic moments. But the truth? It often starts with something much grittier, like a desperate struggle for survival on some muddy riverbank. So today, we're going to go back, way back, to the very beginning of the American story and look at the genesis of Jamestown.
All right, let's set the scene. The year is 1607. The place is Jamestown, Virginia. And I want you to picture this tiny, fragile, and honestly pretty miserable little settlement. This is it. This is where the seeds of what would become a new nation were first planted.
Now, the key word here, the one that changes everything, is permanent. See, there had been other attempts before, right? You've probably heard of the lost colony of Roanoke. They just vanished. But Jamestown? Against all odds, this was the one that stuck.
But let's be real, its survival was hanging on by a thread. This was not some story of immediate success. No way. It was a story of pure desperation, of starvation, and just a constant, brutal fight against an environment that seemed to want them gone.
So, what does it actually take to survive when you're on the very brink of collapse? Well, let's take a look at the brutal realities these first colonists were up against. Life in early Jamestown was, and I'm not exaggerating, absolutely horrific. We're talking about diseases spreading like wildfire from bad water, constant threats of attack, and get this, a bunch of the colonists were so-called gentlemen. These were investors who'd probably never worked a day in their lives, and now they were expected to build a whole new world from scratch. It was a disaster waiting to happen.
And into all this chaos steps Captain John Smith. He comes in with a major dose of reality. His rule was simple. It was harsh, but man, was it necessary for survival. If you don't work, you don't eat. End of story. Suddenly, your social status back in London meant nothing when everyone was starving.
But just surviving day to day, well, that's not enough to build a real colony. It needs a reason to exist, an economic engine. The settlers came to the New World looking for gold, but they ended up finding something way more valuable. So here's the million-dollar question, right? How do you take this failing, starving outpost that's just bleeding money and turn it into something that actually thrives? What could possibly save them? The answer came down to a single word: tobacco. This wasn't the shiny gold they were hoping to find, but it quickly became their brown gold. A new, sweeter kind of tobacco that John Rolfe started cultivating became a massive hit in Europe. And just like that, Jamestown had a cash crop. It finally had a purpose. And tobacco did so much more than just bring in cash. It kicked off this incredible chain reaction. First, it created a powerful economic engine. That engine then attracted new settlers, which fueled population growth. And with more people and a stable economy, you start to get real social stability. For the first time, they weren't just surviving. They were actually building a society. Economic success brings stability, and with that stability comes a brand new question. Who gets to be in charge here? And this set the stage for a truly revolutionary idea. Okay, the year is 1619. If you remember one date from this, make it this one. This is a huge turning point. Think about it. Just 12 years after they were on the brink of complete and total collapse, something completely new happens in Jamestown. They create something called the House of Burgesses, and this is one of the very first representative governments in the Americas. I mean, for the first time, colonists who were elected, not just appointed by some guy in London, are getting together to make their own laws for their own community. It's a game changer. This shows you just how massive this shift in thinking was. The old way of doing things, the old world rule, was simple. You take orders from a king who's 3,000 miles away. But this new idea, born right there in Virginia, was that the colony shall be governed by its people. I mean, that was a radical, almost dangerous idea at the time. So what does all this add up to? Let's connect the dots here. From survival to tobacco to self-rule, and see the lasting legacy of what we could call the Jamestown idea. You see, this desire to govern themselves wasn't just about practicalities. It was rooted in this really deep philosophical idea, basically captured in this phrase, "We are born free." The belief that people have natural rights, that they shouldn't just be subjects of some distant king. That idea was really starting to take root. So let's trace that incredible journey one last time. It starts in 1607 with just a desperate struggle to exist. Then, around 1612, comes the economic lifeline, tobacco. And that success, that stability, leads directly to 1619 and the planting of this powerful, powerful new seed, the idea of self-governance.
So what are the big takeaways from the story of Jamestown? Well, first you learn that pure, raw pragmatism was absolutely essential for survival. Second, you see how economic opportunity can be this incredible engine for political change. And finally, you realize that the American idea of self-rule wasn't born in a comfortable debate hall. It was forged in the fire of real hardship.
And that really leaves us with one last big question to think about. This formula they stumbled upon in Jamestown, this powerful mix of economic freedom and political self-rule, how much of that is still the engine, the very heart of the American identity today?